Out here in the perimeter, there are no stars. Out here, we is stoned, immaculate.
Hello and welcome. This is the C86 show. I'm David Eastaugh. As you know, we love a special guest. This week it's going to be the turn of the singer, songwriter, performer Jean Caffeine, who I spoke to very recently to find out more about life, love and poetry. Indeed, I did. This is the interview. She was in lots of different sort of musical combos over the years. Probably one of the most famous one is a all-women no wave band from New York in the early 80s called Pulsallama, which featured an amazing array of people, which was all very exciting, and has gone on to do lots of solo stuff as well. But this is the interview. You're going to find out everything and much, much more. Anyway, so after several minutes of interesting but casual chat, we get down to that exciting subject that was the early formative years. Jean, it's over to you.
Well, because I'm American, and we didn't have what you had. My musical awakening was probably seeing the Rolling Stones in 1975. Because before that, I had a Captain and Tennille album, and I had, as a kid, I had these musicals. I think I have a secret, what's it called when you have secret shame?
Sort of guilty pleasure. They refer to it as a guilty pleasure, don't they?
Pleasure. I could still sing you a bunch of musicals, but that does not go with my punk rock identity or my, very well crafted identity that, you can't craft your identity in the era of the internet.
No, but in the old days, you could sort of guard it a bit more, couldn't you? And not sort of admit to in Annie, Get Your Gun or
Exactly. Once Upon a Mattress or You're a Good Man, Charlie Brown. Yes, all of that. But, if you search the internet, you're not going to find me singing You're a Good Man, Charlie Brown.
No, not as a.
Yeah, so I think I had, I'm trying to write a memoir and you're supposed to have pivot points. So the first pivot point, I guess, is seeing the Stones. Because as soon as that was over, I was like, oh, live music, rock and roll. Right after that, I went to see, we had all these big, outdoor concerts. I mean, compared to England, it was so lame. I mean, you're seeing David Bowie. I went to see Peter Frampton. I'm 4 years older than you. But on the Frampton tour was the Last Faces tour. And Eric Burdon with War. So it wasn't so terrible, but I just saw all this arena stuff for 2 years. And I just blew up my life to go to these rock shows. And then I really don't know what happened first, whether I saw the Sex Pistols on the Tom Snyder show before I saw a poster for these punk rock bands. But there really wasn't punk rock in San Francisco yet. I just saw this very arresting poster.
Yes.
Because I would spend a lot of time in North Beach. That's the area associated with the Beatniks. And it had really nice used clothing stores and great bookstore, famous bookstore, City Lights. And
yes.
It's near Chinese food and Italian food. So this was not near my house, but that was my favorite neighborhood. So I'd go walk the neighborhood and I saw this poster and it looked arresting. So I went by the club in the day and I asked them, would they let in a minor? And they said yes, because it was a Filipino supper club and they served a Filipino buffet of noodles and egg rolls called lumpia. So I struggle to remember if the first band I saw were the Nuns or Crime. It was one of them, and then later I would see both of them together. I just sort of have to pick one for my memoir because I can't.
Yes.
I keep trying to nail it down, and that just puts me cycling.
Yes.
And so that is the second pivot point. Something unusual was going on there. It was I think it was Crime. I do think it was Crime, not the Nuns, but both of them wore leather and sang about offensive things. And I very much just remember this weird cast of characters hanging out, all older than me. And
so did you? I was going to say, did your parents have much influence on your cultural upbringing? Did they have quite a impact? Because
Until
you
then,
did.
yes. Until then, yes. But once I became this rock and roller, and much more once I became this punk rocker, they were like, "Get out, get out." but they had a great record collection, and my mom was a poet and a literary critic and a wannabe biographer, and my dad was a doctor, but he was the world's biggest art lover. So I definitely had a sort of a bed of privilege and encouragement for the art making piece in my life. And my dad would, buy me markers when it was my birthday, buy me markers when it was Christmas. Why were we celebrating Christmas? We're Jewish. I don't know, but we American Jews, many of us, very secular,
Yes.
very, very, very secular. Immigrants want to become Americans. So, and I think now people have more pride in the cultures they came from and hold on to more of the culture. I think in Canada, people hold on to more of their culture, but in America, I think we were big on assimilation. And so
Yes.
my parents
They
assimilated.
refer to it as the melting pot, didn't they? Because your mum was Emily, wasn't she? Was that
Yeah.
right? And she wrote a book on was it Myrna Lloyd, who
Myrna Lloyd.
who sort of starred in loads of movies during the 40s and 50s with this great actor, didn't she?
Yeah.
Which was
Yeah. I'm blanking on his name, but I can picture him. William Powell.
William Powell. That's the one. The Thin Man films. These films came out. So, did you kind of hear stories about all these kind of famous characters from the 30s and 40s?
Well, she really didn't get into that until late in my adulthood. In my teens, she was trying to write about a kind of obscure character named Gertrude Atherton. In California, there's a city named after her. And she had kind of fascinating life, but because she wasn't Myrna Loy, she wasn't Rudolph Valentino, she wasn't Mae West, it was very hard to sell the book. My mom tried to sell that book for 10 years.
Right.
So I didn't really, we heard, well, in adulthood, I heard a lot of stories about Mae West, none of which I remember because I really think my memory is tanking. Not what you want from a memoirist. A wannabe memoirist. It's really been a puzzle. I have to interview other people to find out what I did.
Yes, I know. This is true.
Memento. It's like Memento.
Oh, yes, of course. We remember that film so well, piecing it together. Did you, being in California, did you suddenly, or not suddenly, but sort of have that awareness of things like the 60s counterculture and tie-dye patchouli, and also things like the Cockettes? The Cockettes come from California, don't they? The famous Fayette. And
so as far as the kind of peace and love piece, that was definitely in the background. I went to like a war protest with my mom. I remember I remember us sitting on this hippie hill and somebody passing a joint, but of course you're 4 or 5, you're not like, why are they passing me that joint? I'm like, why are they passing a child a cigarette?
Yes,
that's wrong, Mom. So I remember the clothes. I remember that my parents had this friend, Bob Bebo, and he had a garage sale. And what I really, really, really wanted from the garage sale was Indian bedspread. Remember, they were like very trendy in the 60s.
Yes.
And when it didn't sell, he gave me the Indian bedspread. So I remember a lot of the trappings of the 60s. As far as the Cockettes, that's such a different thing. And I feel like I had a moment as a teen where I was a little bit immersed in like gay Polk Street culture, but I really didn't know who the Cockettes were until much, much later. And so I didn't experience the Cockettes. I probably started hearing about the Cockettes through the Screamers, because I think Tomato de Plente of the Screamers might have performed with the Cockettes. And if he didn't, he performed with a New York version of a wild theater troupe. But this is getting fuzzy.
Yes.
Penelope Houston, she knows Fayette, Penelope Houston of the Avengers. And And in fact, we tried to knock on a door of a cool house where she said Fayette lived. This was about 2 years ago, but no one answered. So I didn't meet Fayette. And
Oh, so close.
I hear stories. I hear stories. Did you interview Fayette?
Oh, yes, because she brought this amazing book out a couple of years ago. So I've done quite a few of the members of the Cockettes who, surprisingly, quite a lot are still alive, which are quite nice. So, yes, Pam Tent and a few other chaps. So,
are there any documentaries about the Cockettes?
Yes, there is. You can find it and probably stream one. Yeah, actually, there is one particular one, which is just behind me, somewhere up there.
Oh, okay. Okay. So you're just a total pop culture junkie.
Yes,
punk rock is not your specialty. That's just something that's happened recently. And somehow I'm still trying to figure out how you're interviewing me. I'm pretty low on the radar here. I mean, like I'm like the cult of the cult figures.
Oh, that's good.
Cult figures.
I do sort of have a ability to dig down. So look, so you mentioned the Avengers. So I did an interview with Penelope, and yes, and they were supporting the Sex Pistols in '78, weren't they? At Winterland
They blew
Garden.
off the stage. Well, I would think that because we're from San Francisco, but that's their last show. They weren't very good. Sid was unplugged for a lot of it.
Yes.
He was totally wasted. John said, "Do you ever get the feeling you've been cheated?" And the answer was yes. And it's very disappointing. I'm a person who's always had very high expectations.
Yes.
And I had such high expectations for that show. But if you talk to someone different, they'll be like, "Oh, that show was a blast." So, to each his own. I thought it was terrible. They played all these kicker bars, these country bars, because Malcolm wanted all that attention. But then I guess this was the money shot, the money gig, because it was in a concert hall. But it was, that's where I'd seen Journey. That's where I'd seen Boston. That's where I'd seen Sammy Hagar. That's not where you should go see the Sex Pistols. And once I did my punk rock conversion, I didn't want to be in that same place where I'd seen mostly shitty 70s rock bands and a few fantastic ones like The Who. So, yeah, the Avengers did a great job. I don't think we just say that because we had our own kind of xenophobic regionalism or whatever. But if you can go back now and see those shows, right? You've seen them on Winter.
Yes.
Pretty amazing that you can.
Yes, I think by that stage, I think the Sex Pistols had pretty well had enough, hadn't they? That was the end. I think they kind of wish they'd say goodbye before that kind of moment happened. But it was kind of poetic. So when you got to that period in life, then you would have been a perfect age for punk, wouldn't you? That would have been 16.
That's what I tell my dad, because he's still so mad at me for being like a disrespectful, rebellious teenager punk rocker. I'm like, I told him just a year ago, this was biologically and psychologically normative.
Yes.
My rebellious biology and neurochemistry perfectly aligned with this movement. There's no reason to hold a grudge about it.
No. Well, I think whenever you hit that sort of 16, 18-year-old phase, whatever popular culture is happening is what you're going to consume. And I think anything that comes along later, you might be interested and might listen to, but you can't have that same, I don't think you have that same kind of moment. It doesn't have that kind of, it doesn't resonate so much into the DNA of your soul and your psyche as that kind of moment. Because I think it's important, because I know, people like Lemmy from Motorhead used to sort of talk about his kind of influences, which were all sort of Little Richard and Eddie Cochran and Buddy Holly and, all these kind of people. But, that was what he listened to when he was 16. And though, people thought, you must love this band, and this band, decades later, it's like, yeah, but that wasn't what I listened to when I was 16, which was the formative moment, really. So,
I think I am the same, but I'm also different because of happenstance and my own like travels and stuff. I was part of more than one scene, so I have a little bit more breadth than maybe some others, because after San Francisco and punk rock, well, I did go to England for a few months, and then I came back to San Francisco, and then I went to New York. I was part of that club scene that overlapped with the kind of no wave, post-punk, bands like, one of my roommates was in the Bush Tetras. So
Oh my God, which one?
Laura,
Laura.
not Pat. Well, Pat and Laura went out, and then they broke up, and Pat lived on 6th Avenue and I
Right.
lived around the corner, and I bumped into one of them. I feel like I bumped into Pat. I never really knew Pat that well. I very much admired her, but at some point, Pat or Laura's like, we're breaking up. And I'm like, I perpetually needed a roommate. I lived almost around the corner from them. And I was in that band Pulsallama.
Right. I didn't.
So
Which one was that?
it was called Pulsallama. And I think you want to do your digging on that
Yes.
because you'll get a kick out of it. It was, between 7 and 13 women banging on cowbells and no guitars, trap drums, percussion, 1 or 2 basses. And we were kind of the queens of New York for a minute. And we
Yes.
did play in England. We played at the venue.
Oh, blimey. So look,
And
so
we played also at the club in Manchester that Claude Bessy booked. He didn't he book the Factory for a minute, or
he might have done, yes.
yeah, and
Okay.
we played three British dates, and we opened for the Clash 5 times.
Right. Blimey.
So you just thought you were interviewing like this old punk rocker who makes some art, who makes collages, which is true. But I also was in this other scene. Also, when I got to Austin, it was really, really happening. And to some degree, I was a big part of that scene too. So I feel like I'm unusual in that sense that I caught several things from the kind of classic rock and kind of, I don't know what kind of culture we had in San Francisco before punk rock, but I was very immersed in that. And then the punk rock, and that was like, life changing more than anything else, like you're talking about. But the New York period was really happening.
So
it was like,
did you go to New York in the late 70s with the period of CBGB's and Max's Kansas City before the Mud Club suddenly appeared?
No, I'm more was there during the Mud Club, not at the very beginning. I went for a visit in 78, and it's when one of the Dead Boys, the drummer, had gotten stabbed, and there were several nights of concerts, and I saw those. But I wasn't part of that scene. I was just sort of a tourist that was trying to, I thought maybe I'd be part of the New York scene just by showing up, but New York isn't like that. In New York, you always got to know someone. Weirdly, you asked me all that like hippie stuff about San Francisco, which, we hated as punk rockers, but weirdly, during the week or two that I was in New York on my way to go to London, the movie Hair was filming in Golden Gate Park, and they were looking for extras. So me and my who was even more of a theater nerd than me, she's like, we got to go try to be featured extras for Hair. I'm like, how ironic is it to like have come up, as a child in the era of peace and love, totally reject it in punk rock, nothing worse than like a hippie in punk rock. And then we're just trying to, be extras, like frolicking on the lawn. But we were too busy bleaching our hair punk rock white. We got there late, so we weren't featured extras. We were just like on the
periphery. So I mean, you mentioned the famous, Frampton Comes Live and Boston and Journey. But did you ever go to a Grateful Dead concert?
Ugh, they were so horrible. I guess I had a pre-punk rock DNA, because I just thought they were awful, just awful. And then, I like to go to Winterland almost every weekend before my punk conversion. And just a lot of times it was some spin-off of the Grateful Dead. I just never drank that Kool-Aid. I never got it. I would fight with my best friend's sister. She would say the Grateful Dead are the best band in the world, and I'd be like, this is before punk, the Tubes are the best band in the world, because I like theatrics.
Yes.
I love their theatrics. Before they had the big hit and they started sounding like Journey too, they were like wild and fabulous and unique and indescribable if you never saw them. They come on stage with a motorcycle, but they weren't a huge band. You know, a band in a huge arena now might come on stage with a motorcycle, but this was like in a little club. They had a trapeze artist. It was wild.
Yes, absolutely. So then as we trucked into the 80s, we had Thatcher, and then we had the Falkland War, then we had the miners' strike, Greenham Common, we thought everybody was going to be nuked. You had Ronald Reagan. So by then, the early 80s, you were ensconced in the New York punk scene at this point.
I would not call it a punk scene. I wasn't really in the punk scene. I was more in the club scene,
right,
which overlapped with the kind of no wave scene, which overlapped with when hip hop came downtown from the Bronx. So
right.
It was an incredible, is it zeitgeist is the right word?
I think yes, good word.
Incredible cauldron of popular culture. Just unbelievable.
So when did you first meet Anne Magnuson?
Oh, at some point at Club 57, I didn't really know her very well, but I had played drums in a band in San Francisco, and then I moved. And I probably was the type of person that was always trying to show these very cool New Yorkers that I was cool too. And it was some work. And if you're cool, you don't tell everybody you're cool. So obviously it wasn't, I felt like, San Francisco was this pretty hip place, but when I moved to New York, where I was born, where so many of my relatives were from, I sort of felt like a hillbilly wearing a potato sack. I don't know, maybe that's a microaggression. I'm sorry, Appalachian people, but I felt like I was, just very green, but I really wasn't. But people were so phenomenally cool there that anyways, so I didn't really know Anne, but I think this talking about playing drums led me to play drums in a Velvet Underground tribute band that only had 3 shows.
Right.
And for a minute, I think, before I arrived on the scene, for a minute, the bass player who put it together, Kai Eric, who's played with a lot of other people like the Panther Burns. This was Kai's project, and she'd probably seen me do this, be cast as Maureen Tucker in this Velvet Underground band. So the Club 57 was full of theme events. I don't know if you've done any research on Club 57.
Yes, it seems like where the beautiful people hung out and was kind of very hip.
The Mud Club is where the beautiful people hung out. The Club 57 is where some of them were beautiful people, but this kind of funky cast of characters, very insular friends, more tied into the SVA art school scene, but also tied into liking monster movies. It's just, the thing I always describe it as is like, that movie where it's it's Mickey Rooney and Judy Garland, and they say, let's put on a show. That it's like a 40s movie.
Right. Yes, I've got you. It's, yeah, well, I just kind of,
I don't know. Let's put on a show. There was this kind of let's put on a show vibe there, but in a very cliquey, imaginative, retro, almost more like B-52s-ish, except it was a multimedia venue. You could see a movie, you could see a play. I had an art show there. I stole my idea I borrowed my idea from Keith Haring, so it wasn't an original idea. It was a color Xerox art show. There was just something different happening every night, and kooky stuff would happen. And so part of this kooky stuff was the Ladies Auxiliary of the Lower East Side, of which Anne was a part of. Maybe she was the leader. I don't know, because I wasn't in the Ladies Auxiliary of Lower East Side. They put on this night, Rites of Spring Bacchanal, and they wanted a band. Not a very, I don't know if it wasn't really exactly a band, but Anne asked me if I would play drums at the event. And everybody was wearing togas made out of sheets. And it was just completely wild. And all these women were banging on things, beer bottles, cowbells. At least one person played the bass. Anne played the bass. And it was a huge smash. People loved it. It was so crazy. It wasn't a band. It was just this event, but it had noise making. And so very shortly afterwards, we were invited to play a club called the Cavern, which was a short-lived downtown club. And there was a budget, so we could make a little money, and we had a budget to decorate. And decorating was always like a big part of things that happened at Club 57. So
Right.
the reason I'm saying it wasn't so beautiful, people, is it had this sort of arts and crafts aspect and this retro aspect and this kind of cliquey aspect, even though I was sort of on the edges of that. And it was multidisciplinary.
My God,
And it was
that sounds
the basement of a church. I mean, it was not fancy.
right.
There was no guy at the door with a velvet rope.
Yes, because I did an interview with dear old Richard doing his the Mud Club book, which is a kind of a so I got a sort of an idea of that kind of scene.
Now anyone who's alive, we all identify together as part of this scene. But at the time, there were all these like circles, and the circles would sometimes overlap in a Venn diagram. Were you a Mud Club person? Were you a Club 57 person? Were you a Danceteria person? Were you a...
I guess there's CBGBs and Max's Kansas City as well.
Those predated, and they're more, and those are like rock and roll based, right? Whereas these other clubs are less, bands played at them, and whatever we would call the music of the moment featured prominently at Danceteria and featured somewhat prominently at Mud Club and lots of other clubs. I saw lots of live music, tons of live music. But there were disparate things happening at these clubs. Again, more breadth to them. Whereas, you're never, to my knowledge, and I'm no expert on CBs, but I doubt they had like an art show or a play.
No, God, it
but at
wouldn't
Club
happen.
57, Scott Whitman and Mark Shaman put on several plays, and now they're on Broadway.
Amazing. Yes, it is good. So then the band.
I was in one of the plays.
Oh, which one?
Trojan Women.
Nice. Gosh, it was.
Hollywood Lawn was in it. Cherry Vanilla was in it. You're so pop culturally literate. I could just throw the names at you.
Yeah. So Cherry, I've interviewed her as well, so it's like quite handy actually.
Yeah.
She now lives in Palm Springs. So look. So she's doing well. She's good. Yeah. But look, so how does the band then form? Pulsallama?
It seems to be there's some dispute about the origin story. From many of the women, I hear that the Ladies Auxiliary of the Lower East Side had the event and wanted to have this, noise-making performance. I got in it from Anne asking me. So it's very hard for me to answer that question, because I think if you ask Anne, she says she started it. And if you ask other women in the band, they're like, no, we were all part of this group. I can't speak to it. But what happened is, because it was so well received, we did it again. And if you do it again, like these jokey things you do start becoming songs, and you rehearse them. So this song piece started growing, but it always came out of something performance-based. And then when Anne left, it got a little less performance-based. Mostly we just rehearsed, so we got more musical, which some people didn't like, but it still was chaotic, and it still was performative, and still was incredibly silly. But it didn't really start out as a band. It became something that existed as a function of its own success. People were so entertained. So,
Yes.
at the Cavern, we got a show at Danceteria. I worked at Danceteria in the coat check. I sometimes worked at Danceteria as a DJ. On even more rare occasions, sometimes I threw parties at Danceteria. And so I was like in the inside of the Danceteria thing. So that may or may not have been why we got shows there. We probably got shows there because, word of mouth buzz happening. Jim Farrat had an ear to the pavement all the time. So I don't know if it came from me working there. Later, Min was also in Pulsallama, worked there too.
Yes, but obviously you get kind of support slots with Public Image Limited, which is amazing.
Oh, we were kicked off that support slot.
You were kicked
off.
We
never played it. Keith got us kicked off.
Pardon?
Keith got us kicked off.
What, Keith Levine?
Yeah.
Oh.
R.I.P.
Right.
He got us kicked off. He married our bass player, who he met through me, because he was my friend who I let bathe in the bathtub in the kitchen of my apartment.
Oh, who was the bass player that he married?
Laurie Montana.
Right. Gosh, it's like
she was in a band called Art. Before Pulsallama, she was in a band called Art. And I think she had a little record label for a while. She's a very nice person who you can interview. She has an interesting story too, but I don't know if she wants to talk about the Keith thing. She had a son with Keith.
Right.
But anyways, after I introduced them, the story goes that Keith said, "It's me or the band."
Old-fashioned man.
You wouldn't think.
I don't
you
know.
Really wouldn't think.
Oh, yes. Well, it's a sort of indication of things to come. So
Laurie did say that she was having a lot of stage fright, but I did not know that at the time. I only knew the piece where she had to choose, and she made the Sophie's Choice, and she chose Keith.
Yes.
And that was incredibly heartbreaking because she was the glue for the band. She got along with everyone, where I was a little more high drama.
Yeah, well, it's I could imagine, young people, lots of you. It's a high drama kind of period, isn't it? So then you support the Clash and you come to the UK as well?
We did not come to the UK supporting the Clash. We came to the UK just doing 3 club dates. We probably supported people, but I don't remember who they were.
Yes.
But that wasn't a part with the Clash. We played with the Clash at Asbury Park, 3 dates, and Cape Cod, I think, was just 2 dates.
And how did that go down?
On the first night, it pelted us with tons of things, and people in the band got bruises. Not me, because I'm so far in the back playing drums. On the second night, less pelting. Before the third night, someone said, "Hey, why didn't you play the whatever song?" So I guess there was some warming to the band. But the Clash would program these fantastic bands, which the Clash's American audience wasn't open to. They just the hits.
Yes.
So I saw them at Bonds with the slits opened, Grandmaster Flash opened. I don't remember which shows I saw. I know I saw the slits. The audience was not nice to the slits. I think ESG might have opened. Definitely they booed Grandmaster Flash. The Clash had impeccable taste and were on the cutting edge, and Cosmo. But the audience wasn't where the Clash was.
No.
And so we weren't super well received. And then Cape Cod was worse. Cape Cod was even worse. And
Yes, tricky times. But you
we
recorded
were
a couple.
supposed to open for Pill on New Year's, and you may have seen an advert for it, but it didn't happen. And
Is this the one? Is this
that's
the
a
one that they?
bone
Is this the
contention
one?
with me.
Okay, is this the one where the band Peel play behind a sheet and it all kicks off and is a riot, or is that another
No,
gig?
that was at the Ritz. That was at the Ritz. I don't think I was there because, I guess I went from really, really loving Pill before I moved to New York. I saw Pill play in Los Angeles and San Francisco. I thought they were excellent. But this whole thing with Keith, like, broke our hearts and
Yes,
took our favorite person away. And I don't know about you, but when my heart's broken, I'm pretty mad.
yes, I hold on to that pain and
Yeah,
anger for
yeah,
a long time. Yes, I
yeah,
know.
yeah. I mean, I think at one point Keith Facebooked me and I was like, he friended me. I'm like, you're not my friend. But the funny thing is, I see this in my father, that if I don't interface with somebody, I can hold on to that stuff for a long time. But if I bump into you, it's over. I don't care. Just want to be friends. It just goes away.
Yes,
But if you don't see the person, you can hold it. And so, that it just broke my heart. He took our bass player, he took our most reasoned friend away, and he'd been my friend.
yes, yes. There you go.
He's
I
a
can't.
junkie. Sorry,
Yeah,
he's a super talented musician, but he's a junkie. Like, what's the sell?
I know, and it's true. I can't remember. Did he? Is
I
he
lost
still?
two friends because he was my friend too. I lost two friends, but I after a while only mourned the loss of the one, Lori.
Yes, absolutely. And you recorded on Y Records, which was Dick
Yeah,
Odell's label, wasn't it?
yeah.
And what was
I
that
think I
record?
met Dick Odell when the pop group came to town. I went to see them at Tier 3,
Yes,
and I in England, I'd gone to see the Raincoats. I feel like that's kind of a similar crowd. Uh,
yes,
um, I don't even know how to describe that crowd. Kind of ragtag and very original.
and very indie, very quite.
So indie. Before we would have a word for it, so I would
Yes,
call it unique, not indie, because you know what? Indie is so generic at this point. Maybe just I don't know. Totally unique.
yes, absolutely. There was yes, the Raincoats, the Marine Girls. There were a lot of great bands at that. The Dolly Mixtures as well. They were very good. So
I
when,
didn't
so
like
so
them.
how did the
Au
band
pairs,
come to an
I
end?
liked. Au
What was that?
pairs. I like the Au Pairs. They weren't Y Records, but I
Oh
like
my
the Au
God.
Pairs.
I interviewed Leslie last night.
Oh, you did?
Yes.
She came over to my house. She came over to my apartment on New Year's. I think the Au Pairs opened for the Gang of Four. And I
Right.
have a friend, Leticia Terrero. She worked in a Japanese restaurant and she knew how to make dumplings. So I asked Leticia Terrero if she'd come over, and we made like a zillion dumplings. And then like people came over to my incredibly tiny apartment. Some of them were in the Au Pairs. And I
Yes.
remember going out with Leslie to Bleecker Street. We had a slice of pizza. And you know how polite you all are. You're so polite. And she said, lovely pizza. Nobody uses lovely to describe food in America. I was like, I never heard pizza described as lovely. I love it.
Yes.
It's so nice.
So, well, anyway, Leslie's doing some 3 weeks of a solo show supporting the Chameleons, starting
Oh,
tonight, I think, in
okay.
Liverpool. And yes, so she's keeping well. It's
Oh,
nice. It's nice to see her again. So, yes.
she's very
So
talented.
she wants to make more music again after decades of doing other things. So,
Well, it's very gratifying. I want to make more music too. I just recorded 3 songs. And I'm pretty proud of it, but I don't know what to do with it in this moment. for us dinosaurs, that there's no kind of support system. It just gets lost. It just gets lost in the noise. So I'll go longer and longer and not record. I'll go longer and longer and not play out. But I always want to. It's just it's so hard to get people to your shows. I could do all the things people do now.
Yes.
But the people my age mostly aren't doing those things. So, and they're not going out unless they're going to see a band from their youth,
I know this is one of our problems. So how does
really a built-in heartbreak?
It is a built-in heartbreak, but so how does the band break up at this point? Does it just naturally putter out, or is there a exciting moment?
I really kind of think it limped along after Lori, and we got another bass player, and she tried her best. But this is a very cliquey crowd of people, and we probably didn't totally let her in. And she didn't have that kind of pizzazz that Lori had. There was so much drama. The singer Wendy got with her husband. That didn't help.
Yes.
And then yet she was, I think, still in the band. We got signed to be booked by is it IRS or FBI,
Yes.
one of those. And we'd been a very spoiled and privileged band that had always made money and had always gotten a lot of attention every time we played. And when they booked us like a regular band. So we went and played in Brooklyn, the bowels of Brooklyn, not trendy Brooklyn. There was no trendy Brooklyn. And nobody was there. And then they maybe booked us, and it might have been them that booked us in Trenton, New Jersey. They just booked us like a couple very soul-crushing shows, which now that I've played music for years, I mean, half of them are soul-crushing shows. Grow a pair,
Yes.
Get some thicker skin. But we were having a lot of, we had a series of things not go our way. Dick O'Dell said he had no more money.
Yes.
And we had 90% of the music recorded and about 10-20% of the vocals recorded. So there were just all these really bad impediments. It's like an arc. It's like you're writing, I write my memoir, it's all over the place. There's no arc. Maybe it'll not get published. It's really a struggle for me. What does a person who didn't know what they're doing, how does a person characterize their arc when you didn't even know what you were doing back then?
Yes.
But Pulsallama, I think we did kind of know what we were doing, and there were all these impediments. Anne left. We got over that, did it without Anne. But it was a loss, but then it became something else. It was great with Anne, but it was great without Anne. It was just different. Same thing. Danny and Andy were in the band. Danny was a total original. She's so unique. But life went on. We missed Danny, but the band was still good. I really think it was.
Yes.
But then Lori left. That's when, to me, it wasn't as good. And so there was that impediment. And when the album wasn't going to get finished, then any friction we had, which I know I was a part of, ramped up. So there was some fight, and it was the end. But I feel like whatever the fight was a symptom and wasn't the wound. You might talk to someone else and they'll have a different story. Okay. It was very, very, very discouraging to go into the studio with Butch. Is it Butch Jones who engineered all the Talking Heads records, and Mark Keynes, who did the Madonna, everybody, and have a blast doing it, have something that sounded so good. I brought my parents to the studio and then have it just disappear. Maybe Dick just didn't want to be involved in the band anymore. I don't know what it was. I think that broke the band,
Yes, absolutely.
But I'm sure there was drama, and I'm sure I was a part of drama, but it's that broke the band. When things break, they don't just break. It's like a piece of mat board. Things get scored. And, when Anne left, slightly scored. When Danny left, scored a little deeper. When Lori left, scored much deeper. Kicked off the pill show. That's just sort of like being kicked in the face. The other bass player, Judy, we liked her, but it never quite gelled. I don't think we were nice enough to Judy in retrospect, but it's easy to, hindsight's
Yes.
20. And then, but the big ticket item is Dick saying he had no money. And it's one thing to have no money. You barely started it. This thing's almost done. And it sounded great.
So when the album comes out, or you have a sort of couple of singles and then a sort of album that came out just over 13 years ago. Are these kind of, were you pleased with the sound that they created and had managed to capture?
Yes, but no full album came out until 2020. The full album came out in 2020 was from a live recording. I mean, our beautifully recorded album, our multi-tracked album, gone. I tried so hard to try to find out, where are these tracks? I heard that there was a fire in the studio.
Oh my God.
Yeah. Hey, I would love to pivot because you said you want to ask me about my creative work, and I know the story is all in the old stuff, but circle back.
Yeah, so then just going forward, then what's the next kind of project that you're working on and then going to for the next stage of your life?
For about 2 years, I played in a band called Clambake that had none of the attention of Pulsallama, and it was more guitar driven, and it featured two people from Austin, and one of them called me up because several people from the San Francisco punk scene had moved to Austin and become part of the Austin music scene. So when these two women, Liz Gall and Kathy Crane, moved to New York, they looked me up and we made a band. It was a very sweet band with several songwriters, all of whom were really good. And that ran its course because that band, definitely interpersonal things were a piece of that. But I also think that band ran its course because it didn't take off like Pulsallama.
Yes.
And at the same time, some people from Pulsallama joined a band called Das Furlines. They seemed to be having a moment where they played polka music and they'd play Montreal, and they seemed to have a little moment too, a similar moment to like the Pulsallama moment of ladies doing weird things on stage performatively, not your normal band, not doing what Bananarama was doing, not doing what the Bangles were doing, just something weirder. And so Clambake also had a moment where we recorded a demo at Richard Hell's home studio, not with him producing, with this other guy producing, and where Alex Chilton mixed our 4-song EP. But that guy seemed to run out of money too. I don't know the order of events. We may have broken up and he may have said, I don't want to spend money on a band that's broken up. So that didn't come out either. But those tracks now you can hear the demo ones. You can hear them on you can look for them on YouTube. So there was that chapter. And then I was still in New York, but I was shifting. To wanting, to go to the park more or the beach more. And I was shifting from a drummer to wanting to learn to play guitar and be a songwriter, which I was not very good at. I was better at being a songwriter than a guitar player. I was terrible guitar player. But I was shifting. And somehow through these women that were from Austin, I just kept meeting more people from Austin. And these San Francisco people, a lot of them had gone from San Francisco to New York to Austin. I was like, what is this place? It's like a Bermuda Triangle. I've got to go check this place out. So I went with my former bandmate, Julie Lawler, and we we took Amtrak across country. You got to have 3 stops.
Right.
So one of them was in New Orleans, one of them was in Austin. And I went and checked out the scene, and I'd already kind of made this kind of nature pivot. And in Austin, you could swim outside, and people were like barbecuing. And my friend Alejandro lived on a block where there were other musicians. This fellow named Dickie Lee Irwin, who's like a honey-coated human of a individual, a banjo player, guitar player, songwriter from New Mexico. There was just people, there was so much more connectivity in Austin, and you had more access to the outside, and the rents were really low, and the scenesters were really literate. I don't mean like they could read. I just mean like bookish, because it was a college town, and most of the sisters had gone to UT, and could talk to you about Faulkner or whatever. It's a little different than the Mud Club scene, or so it was very appealing to me. And I had taken a couple college classes at community college in New York, because I'd been a big high school dropout in San Francisco, because that punk rock scene was all consuming.
Yes.
High school was good. High school was getting in the way of hanging out. So I was kind of putting a toe in the water to further my education, which had probably been the trajectory that, my middle-class parents had earmarked for me. And I was a big disappointment. So I came to Austin with a plan to take, I think, 2 classes at the out-of-town rate, which is quite expensive. And when I liked it here, I was like, I'm going to stay, and I'm going to wait a year so I can have work and get in-state tuition. So as I did that, I started waitressing, and I started bluffing my way into shows, but now I was the front person instead of the drummer.
Yes.
And I booked a show at a place called Patos Tacos, a place that had a big giant onion on top of the sign. And I told them I had a band, but I was fronting. I didn't have a band. And at a party at Alejandro's, I met a real cool guitar player named Mick Buck, and who's now the curator of the Country Music Hall of Fame. Right. Not Mike Buck. Mike Buck owns Antones and is a drummer. Mick Buck played guitar, and now is this, curator, ethnomusicologist. And so Mick said he would play, and that was sort of the birth of a band that I formed called Gene Caffeine's All Night Truck Stop. So I'd gone from being a very bossy drummer in the back,
yes,
to being a slightly less bossy front person in the front. Hey, can we take 5?
Yes, absolutely. I'll just hit pause.
Okay.
A minute. I'll put the light on.
Happy period. Bad hair. I'm so glad that you're not gonna.
Yes, no, that's fine. But look, so with the all band, the new lineup.
Very happy period. Happy period. What's the question?
This is the album Knocked Down 7 Times, Got Up 8. This is the first.
Before that. The first thing is there was a cassette. There was a cassette called Big Wheel. Had 4 songs on it.
Right.
Then a German label. And then there was actually, no, the Big Wheel was a full. First I had 4 songs, but eventually I got an album's length version of that record called Big Wheel. And then a German company that really didn't exist put out just a few records, and I was CDs, and I was the first one. And I think they put out a Walter Silas Humara thing called the Silos. I don't know if he put out the Silos or a side project of Walter's. I can't remember. And I got to go play Berlin, a festival in Berlin because of that.
Fantastic.
That was really I've never played in England. That's a real. I lament that. I really wanted to play in England.
Yes, that is.
I still want to play in England, but I mean, rock and roll is almost dead for people our age. I'd have to have like house shows or something.
Yeah, so in store kind of, yeah.
In store and at your house, and then I'm blanking on the name of a musician who you probably know because he's probably like exactly your age, and he does a radio show, and I think he's from Northern England. His name's John Armstrong. Do you know him and his band?
No, John Armstrong.
Let me
No.
go to Facebook while we're doing this. Right now, I can't remember the name of his band. He's really good at promoting his band, and they keep making records. But I met him through. Oh God, I'm getting super distracted because I'm supposed to pick up a book. Not today, but someone just wrote me. Oh shit. Okay.
What's the book?
And the book is a book by the guy from Green on Red.
Oh.
Okay. Hey, just give me 2 minutes. First of all, I need to look up this guy, John Armstrong's band. And second,
I think the Green on Red guy, is this one of his kind of...
Dan
Stewart.
Yeah.
He's the one who yes, I have interviewed him. He lives in a shack somewhere like Arizona. And yes, I remember he had a lot of squawking birds behind him. He had to keep sort of pushing them away because they were just making too much noise. But yes.
Birds?
Pardon?
Birds?
Yeah, he was sitting outside getting quite hot and sunny. So he was very sweet, Dan Stewart. Yeah, that's the one.
He's really interesting. He's really talented.
Yes.
I was a huge fan of his band during that time when I was doing my nature pivot. I got more into like guitar bands, and that was my favorite bands were Green on Red and the True Believers.
Right.
I have the attention span of a gnat. I was going to look for you. Okay. Okay. So John Armstrong, what's his band's name? I just think you might like him. The music is sort of power punky.
Right.
I don't know how to describe it, but very songish. And he has a record. He has a radio show. So
right, I will check him out, John Armstrong. So yeah, if you see the name of the
band's called the Speed of Sound, or the Speed of Sound. The band is, okay.
So then, so with your new band and new lineup, you then sort of bring out a lot of yes, you start getting on quite a prolific kind of recording period here, don't you?
Yes.
Sort of,
yes, but almost all of them are self-released, except for the British one. I have a lot of recordings. Yeah. So,
and are you? Yeah. And you putting most of them on Bandcamp at this stage?
Most of them are on Bandcamp, but for some reason I didn't put up the first one. Because somewhere in the house I have one copy of the first one. And you know how our computers, before it was really easy to burn a CD, and now our computers are a different way, and it's hard to burn a CD. I could just go and get someone to do that for me for $25, and then I could put it up on Bandcamp. But I don't do a lot of business on Bandcamp. If I hustle, in the pandemic, I hustled more for those Fridays. I don't like the hustle. The hustle takes up too much of my creative time.
Yes.
And I'm just trying to be a little bit more discerning about my creative time. And I'm very attention deficit, and I'm very creative, and it's very easy to start. It's harder to finish things. So I have to whittle some stuff down. And the best thing to me not the best thing about the pandemic, but in the pandemic, I didn't play very much. and that was a drag, but I didn't have to do any self-promotion, and that was heavenly.
Yes.
It's just a bunch of noise, man. And it takes up all your time, and it turns you into like we're already a business, but I don't want the business to be like a business. We do this because we have passion, and then we got to do all this stuff to advertise it, and that's okay. That's part of the deal. But the way you're advertising it is just so irritating.
No, I know.
The old way where it was based around your story. I could do that.
Yes.
But I don't want to do a little dance on TikTok. I feel like I should, because I have some fear of missing out, but I'm 63. Do I really need to do a dance on TikTok? I don't know. I mean, I might blow the whole thing up with my dance, and then I'm dancing to my own music on TikTok because I'm just trying to get more, eyes on my music. But you're only playing 30 seconds of the music. People only have patience for 30 seconds of the music.
Yeah.
Today I had art class, and in the end, I really loved it, but it was a new batch of kids, and I don't teach kids very often anymore. And I can see how the attention spans have shrunk and how the neurodiversity has grown. And there's no judgment around that. It's just really different. And I was trying to kind of introduce something. It's the first day, and almost no one had their eyes on me. It's like they're engaged in something else. They want to finish it, or they don't do eye contact because
yes,
of the spectrum. And I just had to let a lot of stuff go, where before I'd be like, come on, I wanted them to have a good time. I want them to have a good time. But I also, did a lot of work to do the lesson planning, was up at 4. I don't want to blow it off just because they're really enjoying doodling on the folder that I'm having them make so they can put their collages in the folder. The folder is what we call a sponge project. It's just supposed to sponge up extra time. The folder is not the project.
Yes, this is very tricky. So on your sort of discography and your Bandcamp page, you've got 4 solo albums, and the last one was a beautiful one called Sadie Saturday Night, wasn't it? So that was the last album that you put out, or have you got more material?
There's a 4-song EP that came out after Sadie. It doesn't have the same kind of, it's not themey, doesn't have spoken word. It just kind of got lost in the shuffle. Has got one of my collages on the cover. So I have put out a set of 4 songs since then, but it was really kind of hard to getting attention for it. I even play, I did a show. I did a record release that was sponsored by our wonderful, wonderful, wonderful community radio station, Co-op Radio, and it was at a wonderful venue called the Barrel of Fun that's attached to the Alamo Draft House, our franchise that has funky films. But I don't know, it just, this is what happens to most people who put out records that are my age.
Yes.
So it makes it really tricky to know if we should keep doing it.
I think,
if you're someone who records at home using software, then it doesn't matter if people are buying it or not. But I'm a very relational, collaborative type, and I want to record with other musicians, and I want to be recorded by someone who has cool ideas, but will let me have my ideas, and we'll meld together. And that old school kind of way used to cost 10 grand to make a record, and now we're in inflation. So every time I make a new record, it costs a little more, and massively less people hear it. So do you keep doing it because it's your heart and it's your joy, or do you not do it because it's like absolutely financial suicide?
Yes, these are the dilemmas of our life, aren't they? Because the last EP, which was recorded in November 2019, this is the one, Love, What is it? This is the one that you do a cover of The Kids Are All Right, isn't it?
Yeah.
I was listening. Yeah, that's a great set of songs, actually. I really enjoyed listening to that today. So you had yes, your experience of recording that was good.
My experience of recording almost all the time is fantastic. It's such a fun process. I just think it's the funnest creative process, period. Until you get to just the part where you're like mixing it and doing minutia. Like I'm in that part of the phase right now because I have 3 new ones. In my perfect world, I take those 4, the ones with The Kids Are All Right.
Yes.
3 more and somehow scrounge up 2 more. There's a couple covers I like. I have an old song I like. I have a new song from the pandemic. It's fine. I don't know if it's good enough to record. I mean, I would like to have another 10, but this is an old mentality. And one of my friends who's, creative, probably 10 years younger than me, 15 years younger than me, he's like, well, why don't put out albums, just put out singles. But when I put out singles, there's no traction. I'll actually get a tiny bit of traction if I put out an album. There's no traction. Brooklyn Vegan's not going to write about me. All of those, all those really heavy blogs, they're not going to write about you. There's no entrance into it.
Yes.
Before, it's very easy to get attention.
It was. I mean, we had the gatekeepers in this sort of.
We had gatekeepers, and I could get through the gate. And
yes.
and this is a metaphor I make over and over again. I just made it earlier this week to somebody who sometimes plays bass with me, wonderful person, Paul Martinez. I said before, it was like there was a guy with a velvet rope, like at Danceteria, like at Mud Club, and you got let in or you didn't. And a lot of times I didn't get let in when it came to something like a major record label. But when it came to the press, I could get those doors open so easily.
Yes.
But now it's like there's so many artists, and it's like we're in a what's comparable to a mile, kilometer. We're like in a kilometer long warehouse full of storage units. And in each storage unit is something really creative and special. But you'd have to have all the keys of the world, and or a skeleton key, and you'd have to go open each one up to unwrap whatever creative, juicy magic is in there. And then we've got a culture of, inattention, and no one gives a shit.
I know this is true. Well,
friends, if they're young, they just want to go see their friends play. If they're old, they just want to go see whoever it was. For you, it would be the Smiths. For someone else, my generation might be B-52s. My husband just bought me tickets to see Liz Phair. I'd much rather open for Liz Phair. It's like my heroine.
Yes.
I don't go to any of these like nostalgia shows, but I'm going to go to the Liz Phair one where she does Exile in Guyville for the reasons that everybody goes to their those shows from their heart. But because I feel like that show, that album came out when I broke up with somebody, and when I pivoted from playing like wannabe honky tonk to something a little more truer to myself, so something a little more confessional and a little more just genuine, maybe. I love the country stuff massively, but I'm like a Jewish girl that grew up in New York and San Francisco. I wasn't here in The Coal Miner's Daughter.
Right. God.
I like the otherness of it, and I like the form of it, and I love the twang of it. I truly was a super fan, but it wasn't my most earnest presentation. I'm not embarrassed. I loved it. But I was like wearing I was playing shows and bouffanting my hair and wearing like square dancing dresses. I was just sort of cartooning it up, but it came from a place of love. But now we might consider that like cultural appropriation.
Yes, I think this is true. You'd get sort of like, yes, a little bit of a sort of, yes, a little bit of a slap on the wrist for that, wouldn't you? And sort of made to feel a bit guilty. But yes, this is what happens now. So going forward, obviously you on your Bandcamp page, you've got your albums, you've got T-shirts, and you do fanzines as well, don't you?
Well, they're not like real fanzines. You know, a fanzine is like, to me, all about a band. And a lot of people have zines that really have a lot of content. My zines are just little folded mini zines. You know, they're just one paper folded, and I've collaged into them. And then sometimes if someone wants one, I'll photocopy them and send them out. But they're not. You know, I had a fanzine in 1977 and 78. I published a fanzine.
Excellent.
It was called New Diseases.
What was it called?
New Diseases. It only had 2 issues.
Nice.
So this isn't at all like New Diseases, or it's not like someone's fanzine. You know, some cartoonists have little zines and they follow little narratives and arcs. This is just completely rando. And I was making a lot of them in that intersection where COVID met the coming election between Donald Trump and Joe Biden, and George, all the stuff with Black Lives Matter, and just the anxiety and noise and stress of the moment. It seemed like making these little random zines. Sometimes they might touch on something in the moment, but they're totally random.
Mm.
And I didn't sell too many of them. And then I have one that's a little bit more narrative. But to be honest, the way it's put together is funky. And I need to go find a solution where it gets photocopied or mimeographed nicely. Because I have a couple little zines that have these little narratives. And then most of them are these mini zines that are like kooky collages.
Yeah.
And I make a lot of collage.
Yes, I know.
I have an art journey too, you know, where I used to paint, but you know, who wants to paint in their house? It's so messy. Then I started doing printmaking and taking classes. And then I had so many prints. I had too many prints. So I started cutting some of them up and reconfiguring them and sometimes sewing them. And that kind of overlap with me starting to work at an art school, because I retired. I was a full-time kids educator in what we call public school.
Right.
I don't understand why you don't call that public school. What do you call the school you don't pay for?
So that would be a public school, whereas the one you pay for is private school. You know, it's a private school. So that's the class division in our country. So so it's a kind of state public school. State school. I think it's public. Yeah, so that's the one we don't like, the National Health Service.
Yeah, so I taught for, you know, at least 17 years full-time art to kids. And now I am retired from that. And then I just have a bunch of little art teaching side hustles, including one online. And if any of your listeners want to reach out, my online class is a lot of fun.
Excellent.
It's called Collage-ish. ISH dash, you know, collage dash ISH. And, you know, it's pretty independent, prompt driven class with the occasional technical demo. But the focus, it's really a creativity class that's using mostly collage and mixed media as the way to, you know, honor your creativity.
Yes.
Because most people have it, and most people won't show up for themselves to even, you know, there are artists with daily practices, just like there are writers with daily practices. And then there are many others of us who need a little structure to show up. So I
Well,
have some.
absolutely. Yes, I think that's an important thing.
So I find that as fun and as sustaining as playing music, but it's different. It's different. You know, I'm helping others to get their art on. I mean, music's my favorite thing besides swimming. I love
Oh,
swimming.
good. Blimey. Have you cracked? Are you a good, you know, your crawl, your breathing? Is that
My crawl
beautiful?
was terrible, but my breathing was one of those pivoting moments when you talk about, like, you know, if you see a band and that was your pivoting moment. I would say, you know, Rolling Stones pivot, Mabuhay Gardens punk rock pivot, being taught how to breathe underwater pivot. Big change. Changed my life.
That's
I call it my
fantastic.
underwater temple.
Yes, absolutely. No, we love swimming here, so that's good. So look, just last question. If you could have whispered something to your 16-year-old self starting out, is there any, you know, little bit of advice or words of wisdom that you would have just told them, even if that 16-year-old self would have gone, no, not listening.
Fuck those guys. That's what and I don't mean that as in a sexual way.
No,
I mean,
just
fuck them. Don't listen to them.
good idea.
Don't get your self-esteem from them. whether I'm talking about peers or whether I'm talking about my dad, who kind of did a number on me during punk rock. Fuck those guys.
Yes, that's good. That's a good.
Can you say that? Are you going to have to bleep that?
No, I'll put it out. It will be absolutely fine. Look, this has been.
That'll be the title. Fuck those guys.
Fuck those guys, but not in.
I usually, you know, I usually don't love that question. That what would you tell your 16-year-old self? I don't know why. I've had it's come up in my writing classes. You know, other times I might answer it like yelling at myself, but right now the answer is fuck those guys.
Yes, there you go. Well, no, it's good. It's good to be clear. But look, this has been fantastic. Thank you ever so much for this. This has been brilliant, and I'm so pleased to
put it out. I was hoping so much I'd have my single out to time with this, but I haven't even mastered it. It's mixed.
It's mixed, but it's close. It's close. But look, I'll put it out in the next couple of weeks, and if you want, I can send you the link, and then you could put it on your, you know, social media platform site, which I think you've got on Facebook, haven't you?
Yes. If you wait a month, maybe I'll put the single out.
Okay, let's leave it a month, and then I'll put it out with the single.
Okay.
That would be great.
That makes me have to do it. It makes me have to get it mastered.
Yes.
Money is really hell. To master it was $300. So now with inflation, it's probably $4. And money is just so hard.
It's true.
Shouldn't the money come in for the single, not money going out? Also, if anyone wants to help me out, I think I'm about to put a GoFundMe up because I applied for an art making residency in Mexico City.
Yes.
And I got, but it's $2,000. It's $2,000. I think that's about £1,000. Plus that doesn't count getting there and eating. Eating will be affordable. So if anybody wants, I'm going to put up a fundraiser where people could get a little index card artwork of mine or a postcard artwork of mine, and try to raise some dough for the art residency. It's not till January, but I have to pay $1,200 in the next. I'm supposed to do it in the next 6 days.
Oh my God.
So I'll probably just have to borrow from Peter to pay Paul, and then if I do my fundraiser, I can pay Paul back or Peter.
Yes, this is. I know it's.
Anyways, I hate to be hyping, but sometimes people do want to help a project, and actually, I think people would rather do that and then get a little special artwork than just go out and buy your special artwork or go out and buy your CD or whatever. I think when there's a little, you know, people do like to help other people.
Yes, absolutely. No, I think this is very true.
I like to help other people.
Yes, when we can. It's always nice to pay
when
it
we
forward.
can. It's so hard with the money, but when we can, pay it forward. And if not, pay it back.
Yes, but
I
pay it
enjoyed
forward.
this. It was really nice to meet you. What part of are you in?
Norwich in the UK, which is right on the east coast. So we're over on that direction, East Anglia. So you got London, then you got Ipswich, Norwich, and we're towards the continent. So on that side. So
how far from London, or how far?
Like about 100. It's about 100 miles, 120 miles from London.
Okay,
so
2 hours. 2 hours.
Yes, 2 hours, definitely.
So it's a small town life, or it's a small city?
It's a city, I suppose, medium-sized city. Yeah, London. So yeah, that's
My
Norwich.
husband's a total Anglophile. He won't watch any shows with me that aren't set in Britain.
Right.
He's his own thing. He's Mexican, but he's obsessed with Britain and Scotland.
Right. Okay.
Scotland even more. Scotland even more.
Did he like Downton Abbey?
No, because he doesn't like rich people. He likes British crime procedurals.
Right.
He likes things like "Hello, Mr. Prime Minister." What's that?
Yes.
He likes 70s British sitcoms. Yes, you can hear him in the background. He's saying, "Yes, Prime Minister."
Yes, Prime Minister, we did.
But one of my favorite shows is Spaced. That's a British show, Spaced.
Yes, I do.
That's one of my favorite shows from the whole universe ever, of all times.
Yes, I remember that TV series.
It's before Shaun of the Dead.
Yes.
Before Hot Fuzz, and all the guys blew up, but the woman, she should have blown up too. She's fantastic in it. Jessica.
Yes. That's the one. Yeah. No, I remember Space now.
Go back and see it. That's one of my favorite shows.
Absolutely. Look, I must.
Spaced.
I will check that out. But look, thank you ever so much, and I'll keep in touch. Do yes, and likewise. Okay, take care. Have a lovely day. See you later. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye. And that, dear listener, just in case you don't realise, is the end of the interview. A massive thank you to Jean Caffeine for giving me the time for that interview. I will include the link to her website in the notes below. This has been the C86 Show, David Eastaugh. So if you want to contact me, you can on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. Just do C86 Show. These have all been archived interviews, that is, on Spotify, iTunes, Podbean. It's true. Anyway, have a great week. Stay safe.